Dang, Skippy! Where are my manners? Introductions! Call me Deadpool.
Start talking. What's this big heist Wesker's planning?
I didn't carry it out. Honest.
I think I know what.
Naughty, naughty, Psylocke. Keep pulling stunts like that and you'll end up back in MRD custody. And then I'd have to rescue you.
None of you clowns are smart enough to pull this off.
You're quite right, of course, Flash. I knew using these morons would put you off your guard.
It's not that Marvel wants us to forget Rawhide Kid, they just want us to forget how they treated him in 2003. See, Rawhide Kid came out as gay. Love that, great representation. But Marvel writers got in a bit of trouble. Instead of writing the character as a really cool, all-American, Wild West gunslinger that happened to be gay, they turned him into a gay stereotype. LGBTQ+ fans were obviously not happy with the one-note portrayal, and to everyone else, it made the character seem worse than he actually is, because Rawhide Kid is really cool. He was one of the most accomplished gunmen in the days of the American frontier. Even though he was an expert marksman, he also just preferred to take people out with a different set of guns, if you know what I mean, his arms. Marvel also messed up because they included Rawhide's reboot in the adults-only Max line, and Rawhide didn't really fit in. He was gay and therefore that means he's mature content. It just didn't sit well with people and still doesn't. Thankfully, he got another series in 2010 and that was received a bit better. James Jim Patrick Scully, or Skull the Slayer, hasn't appeared since like 2011. It seems like the character will appear and then disappear for a few years before popping up in a random place again. Though the last time we saw him, he had been returned to the Bermuda Triangle with Lee Forrester. His story is equal parts sad and wacky. He was convicted of the accidental death of his brother. His brother was higher than a kite and pulled a knife and things basically got messy. The plane that was transporting the now criminal Skull got caught in a space-time warp in the Bermuda Triangle and they crashed on a planet caught between different points of time. How does Marvel come up with this stuff? Anyway, an alien had left behind a power belt and that's how he gained his super abilities. The power belt can't be worn without damage to the wearer. Skull's health soon began to decline and his skin became see-through. You could see his skeleton that was glowing green. He embraced it though and started going as the Blazing Skull for a minute there. He's crossed paths and fought with Captain America, Hawkeye, and the X-Men. It was in that final battle with the X-Men that we saw him for the last time. He's alive, just we haven't seen him in a while, so I guess Marvel either forgot about him or they are putting their focus elsewhere for a little bit. Jin Genie was a hero that I don't know how it passed the development stage. Basically, Jin Genie would only access her powers when she was completely inebriated. She would have to pump herself full of alcohol and then she was able to create seismic waves. Marvel must have realized that this character was a bit of a disaster because she only lasted one issue, like showed up and then immediately died. Her limited Marvel run happened in X-Force issue 116. That entire issue was full of really weird heroes that only lasted that issue. I seriously wonder what was going on in Marvel's writing rooms for this one. La Nuit was a mutant and on the X-Force reality TV show with Jin Genie. His power was the ability to project a veil of dark energy. We don't actually see him use it though. His stats on his Marvel.com character profile indicate that he isn't the most powerful hero out there, but hey, he tried his best. Big Bertha is a controversial character. Her mutant ability is body transformation. That's not new, but the method that she uses to change her body is interesting. She can add hundreds of pounds to her body to make herself a more formidable foe, but then to get back to where she started from, she has to throw up the excess. Many people view this to be making fun of eating disorders. It's not hard to see why. While she is bulked up, her strength improves and her legs get stronger, allowing her to jump really high and really far. She was part of the Great Lakes team and provided the funding for it through her modeling career. The body Bertha usually exists in is a supermodel, but her hero body is the larger Big Bertha. The Thunderer lasted really long for not doing anything. He just recently died in 2019, kind of. His death was confirmed in 2019, but he actually died in the late 1940s. His entire hero thing was a microphone in his suit. That's it! He did set the microphone up with a speaker system designed to be so loud it was deafening, like thunder. He also has a lightning gun that can blind his enemies. You know what? Even if his hero design is just a speaker, his reason for becoming a hero was very noble. He was frustrated that America wasn't doing enough to fight crime and Yahtzee with an N activities that he decided that he, a regular scientist, was going to take matters into his own hands. He later also appeared as the Black Avenger in his last Golden Age appearance. Overall, having your superpower be a really loud speaker isn't quite as interesting as a lot of other heroes, so it's understandable why he's faded into the background. If you thought we were done with X-Force, think again. You Go Girl is gone. She teleports. She has to sleep after teleporting. The further she goes, the more sleep that she needs. She first discovered her teleportation abilities through sleep. She would keep waking up in random places because she really wanted out of her hometown. Her mutant ability manifested trying to get her out. Eventually, she did make it out to Hollywood and joined the X-Force. She was one of the most popular heroes on the reality TV show. I do love her hero name. She would also be my favorite if I watched the reality show. Overall, her character kind of paled in comparison to other heroes in the Marvel universe. The teleportation is really cool, but she has limits where other heroes just don't. She also appeared and disappeared pretty quick. She was only around for about a year. She was introduced in X-Force issue 116 and died in issue 128. As she lay dying, she requested to be buried among the stars, and that's really cute, so she did get a nice send-off. The other more recent time she's shown up was in 2022's Excellent, but it was just her ghost. Alex Clooney, or Zeitgeist, has a pretty gross power, so it's no surprise that he is not one Marvel would want anyone to remember fondly. The guy has acidic vomit. Like, he can burn through thick metals like steel in no time. He wears a mask thing made out of an unknown material that helps manage his power set. Because the first time he used his powers was a disaster. Axel was on a date with this girl, and as they were about to kiss, he threw up on her face. Even just a regular person doing that is a 0 out of 10, but he's a negative 10 out of 10 because remember, he throws up acid. The poor girl's face was burned, and that's where the date ended. But it haunted Axel for years. He was dating You Go Girl for a minute there, but then kind of died, but didn't die. He actually went into a coma from the wound that really should have killed him. He woke up and chose violence. He kidnapped his ex's daughter. His entire history is just full of weird thing after weird thing, and once again, his mutant ability is acidic vomit. What is happening? I'm with Marvel. Let's just forget about it. Pennies are useless now, at least in Canada. What do you even do with them anymore? Well, Jay Pennington Pennypacker is putting them to good use by using them to fight crime. He throws money at his problems, and he actually appeared in the comic run for Somebody in Part 1, NFL Super Pro. Pennypacker's powers are shown one time and then he never returns. He can shoot pennies out of his hands. With a name like Pennington Pennypacker, he had to have seen that coming. Honestly, this is just the right amount of camp and I kind of love it. Pennypacker got his powers from a self-esteem camp that was actually a front for a scientist that was experimenting and giving people superpowers. Even though Pennington's name was already perfect for his hero persona, he took on the official hero name of Almighty Dollar. Almighty Dollar wasn't the only hero created that day. His college friends also gained powers and became the Girth, the Streak, and the Calculator. Altogether, the four men create the forgettable yet funny team known as the Happy Campers. Y'all, when I first saw this guy, I was shocked, surprised, flabbergasted. Whitewash Jones is his name. I wish I was kidding. Marvel, what were you thinking? Like, seriously, this is so awful. I can't even believe it. It was so bad. Marvel retconned the earlier versions of him to not be like the real guy and instead be a made-up character for propaganda purposes that was like a victim of racism. The character came as part of the group Bucky Barnes got called the Young Allies. The character was a very racially insensitive depiction and wasn't well put together at all. It's no wonder that Marvel made the major retcon and totally redesigned the character for his real-life debut as Washington Wash Jones in 2009, and he was treated with a lot more respect there. One of the many Spider-Women, Maddie Franklin, seems to get put in and then immediately taken out. She is niece to Peter Parker's boss, J. Jonah Jameson. She got her powers through a weird ritual called the Gathering of Five, and then when Spider-Man disappeared for a few months, she was in the game, then out of it soon after because she went missing, then came back, but then during Grim Hunt she was sacrificed, but then in Dead No More she came back as a clone, but then literally crumbled to dust. If I had a nickel for every time I watched a Spider Kid crumble to dust, I would have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice. Some fans didn't like the character just as she was. Others were upset that she got her powers through magic instead of science. Wait till they hear about what happened with the other dimension magic spider and Peter then. Some fans just thought a 3rd Spider-Woman wasn't needed when she first appeared in the 90s. Now it seems like she has also found herself in the movie Madam Web, and I think we all know how that movie did, so we'll see how long this version of Maddie lasts. Now, I'm not sure if Marvel doesn't want us to remember this hero, or if they just forgot about her. Lorna the Jungle Queen hasn't been seen since the final issue in her 1950s series. There were only 26 issues in total, and I've read some of them. They come with some racially insensitive depictions of cultures that were common for the time, so that probably has played a role in why Lorna hasn't been brought back. The last issue ends with her and the animals of the jungle capturing 2 attempted poachers and keeping the preserve an animal sanctuary. We got a comment on a previous video mentioning Lorna that she should be incorporated into the main timeline again by having her appear in Wakanda. I think that's a great idea. They can fix some of the racial insensitivity from the first run and put her in. Lorna's character grew up in the African jungle with her father after her mother died during childbirth. As she grew, Lorna learned survival skills, but when her father passed due to a lion attack, she trained to become a skilled huntress and fighter. She rarely, if ever, used a gun as they had the possibility of jamming and failing, so instead she became a skilled wielder of various blades and spears. Marvel did publish an atlas for Lorna in 2010, so she is on their radar. With Black Panther 3 confirmed but no release date, I think Marvel could do it. I think they could bring in a new and improved Miss Lorna to life. Ulysses Archer hasn't been seen since 2011, and Marvel seems to want to leave that guy in the past. He was created for the 1980 series US1 based on the Tyco toy slot car racing toy line. He appeared as an applicant for Luke Cage and Jessica Jones's daughter's nanny, but he wasn't really in it. It was more like a cameo single panel thing. A few months later, in 2011's Annihilators Volume 1, he appeared again, but only as a supporting character. It feels like Marvel was trying to gauge whether or not fans remembered and wanted to see the guy again. He didn't pick up steam, unfortunately. Now Marvel seems to sweep him under the rug. His power set was a metal skull that could pick up on radio transmissions, and that's pretty much it. He's kind of strong, but he's college educated, good at driving, but the radio transmitter thing is his special skill, which seems less cool in the year 2024, but would have been way cooler in the 1980s. His series was also just wacky. It's only 12 issues long, and yet packed in a fight with a German Zeppelin captain, motorcycle gang, and aliens. The main problem people have had with the comic is the plot seems so unbelievable, a hard feat to accomplish when it comes to superheroes, but I guess an intergalactic trucker would do the trick. Maybe Ulysses will be seen again, but it seems Marvel is overusing his character for anything other than a cameo. Everybody knows the phrase, the luck of the Irish. Marvel capitalized on it and created the hero Shamrock. She is Irish and had the luck of the Irish, bought a pub later in life called the Luck of the Irish, wore green and had red hair. Just like every Irish stereotype rolled into one woman. In recent years, her character has been revamped a little to make everyone forget she started out as a literal walking stereotype. Shamrock's power was mystically mutated physiology. When she was a kid, she was raised by a militant Irish fanatic father. At the age of 3, her dad took her and her brother to the North Ireland mountains, asking the heavens to grant the sun powers to defeat enemies. But he brought his daughter along too, and something got messed up in the power transfer, and lo and behold, Shamrock came to be. She is a vessel for the innocents that died during war, and those innocents are the cause of her power. If Shamrock finds herself in trouble, the souls protect their host, and a soul will manifest itself as energy that makes her lucky. It seems like she was given a predetermined amount of souls though. Her luck had unfortunately either disappeared or wasn't great enough, and she broke her foot. She paid her bills by becoming a coveted hairdresser later on. Steel Grip Starkey's run, like many on this list, was a little racially insensitive and a little weird, which is probably why he is never seen after his 6-issue run and no one talks about him until now. The full title for the series is Steel Grip Starkey and the All-Purpose newest power tool. It was published in 1986. Mr. Starkey is not a superhero. He has no powers, but he is a hero. He was designed to be powerless, to show that the honest working man was equally as much of a hero as Spider-Man or the Hulk. Well, if that working man had access to a magical tool that once touched by one specific person, it would turn into whatever machine you happen to need to save the day. The sentiment is kind of, we may have amazing machines, but the person working it is just as important. The comic itself, while a neat idea, doesn't hold its own when you put it next to the likes of the X-Men and the Avengers. The storylines are a bit out there. One of them is about somebody putting bombs on the moon, and it's not really explained why they do that. Sure, as Marvel fans, we're used to our fair share of wild, never explained plot points, but I'm drawing my line here. Sorry. Sports and comics. Unstoppable force meets an immovable object. Do they go together? Sometimes, and sometimes not. Today's sometimes not is NFL Super Pro. The series premiered in the 90s and lasted about 12 issues plus one bonus Super Bowl special. The starring hero was Phil Grayfield. He was a football player, of course, who got injured saving a small child because he's a hero, but it ended his career on the football field. Soon he stepped onto the hero playing field though. His job was sports reporting. While interviewing a scientist that had created an invulnerable football uniform, two thugs break in and steal everything but that. In the scuffle, some chemicals get on Phil and now he has powers, just like that. Turns out the series author helped write the story so he could get tickets to a Jets game. That's objectively hilarious. Literally, Fabian Nazia said, I was handed the concept and character, including his basic origin. I don't know if that was all the NFL's creative work or a combination of Marvel editorial and the NFL. I didn't ask, I just wanted Jets tickets. He's got his priorities straight, can't fault him there. If someone told me I would get free Eras Tour tickets if I wrote a Taylor Swift comic, it would be done in an hour. The SLE Brothers kicked off in 1989 and then dropped off shortly after. The series is only 6 issues and is a spin-off from a one-off comic strip created for Doctor Who, Follow That TARDIS. It's designed for adults and it follows a pair of brothers who grew up as orphans, but not on the Earth we know. Their Earth is far in the future and looks kind of like if you combine steampunk and 80s neon aesthetics and use that to build a city. It's full of everything weird and bad, very corrupt, and generally unwelcoming. The brothers exist here as private investigators. They are good at what they do, getting the right results, even if they don't always use the most morally sound methods. The brothers were seen in the totally stonking, surprisingly educational, and utterly mind-blowing comic relief comic of 1991, and then in the backup story in Image Comics' Elephant Men issue 16 in 2009, and they haven't been seen since. Probably because the comic and characters weren't received well and the first issue really didn't sell well. Many said the series didn't have captivating enough stories and bad jokes. Now Marvel seems to have left them in the past. Marville, that's M-A-R-V-I-L-L-E, was created in 2002, and I think Marvel has regretted it ever since. It was part of the You Decide campaign, a public contest or publicity stunt, however you want to define it, that put 3 Marvel comics against each other: Captain Marvel, Ultimate Adventures, and of course Marville. Marville was not received well at all. Maybe the worst reception on this list. It's a satire about the Marvel and DC comic scene, but the writing just not very strong. It was so bad that it's the reason many people believe You Decide was a publicity stunt to sell more Captain Marvel comics. The comic follows Kal AOL, who gets sent back in time by his parents to save him from the meteor strike of 5002. Only the world didn't actually get destroyed, so his parents send the time machine to him to bring him back. The 18-year-old hero instead chooses to go to the dawn of time to meet God. 18-year-old activities. The art style changes for that single issue where he meets God, maybe to represent that they are actually meeting God, I don't know. In issue 5 in this universe, Wolverine is one of the first humans. There are a lot of choices that get made for this series. The last issue wasn't even a comic story, it was a submission guideline book so writers could submit their work to be published under Epic Comics. It also contained tips for writing a good comic. I cannot imagine writing one of the worst comics in the Marvel lineup and then ending that run with tips on how to write. Delulu is the Salulu. Marvel and I have something in common. We both want to forget about this. Hawk Owl and Woody were also part of the oddity that was You Decide. They were characters in Ultimate Adventures. They were also Batman and Robin, so clearly a parody of Batman and Robin. But with a catastrophe like Marvel taking most of the You Decide spotlight, the pair almost were forgotten, as Marvel probably hoped, until I grabbed them by the scruff of their neck and dragged them back for this video. The characters weren't fan favorites, and the series itself just never ran on time. The You Decide comics were supposed to come out over a 6-month period, but Ultimate Adventures took over a year. Was it as bad as Marvel? Depends on the reader. I will admit, kind of funny to me at least, Woody rigging the lights in his orphanage to respond to clappers, but only his claps? That's funny, and also extremely impressive. Arabian Knight. This guy has gone under a more intense microscope in the past few years. Anyone who knows this guy probably is like, I've been waiting for this one. For anyone who may be confused, representation, it's great. We love to see it. Arabian Knight is a powerful Muslim hero. But when that representation comes as a caricature of a culture or is done in a way that makes people of the culture feel like you're making fun of them, that's frowned upon for a good reason. It's not very nice. So Marvel did reboot this guy with a less stereotypical image and are probably hoping we all just leave the other one in the faraway depths of our minds. Editor Andy Schmidt agrees with this take. He is quoted saying, "The first version of Arabian Knight was just a visual stereotype that had no real character behind him. The original had a special magic carpet that would only respond to his mental commands, and his weapon was a scimitar. In the new version, the magic carpet got unraveled and made into a suit for Arabian Knight that still gives him all the same powers the carpet had had. And he's now just super cool. I scream, you scream, we all scream for ice cream. That's a fun phrase, so why not make a character out of it? Does it sound like a weird idea? Yeah, that's probably why Marvel wants us to leave Ice Cream behind. Ice Cream's mutant ability is turning himself into any ice cream, even a banana split. If you leave him in extreme heat or cold too long, he's gonna either stay melted, unable to solidify again, or will freeze totally solid and can't move. He was in Obnoxo the Clown in 1983 and literally was not seen until 2023. In X-Men Before the Fall, Mutant First Strike, he is giving out ice cream at a celebration. He just gives out ice cream, he doesn't do anything else. It seems like he's a character Marvel brings in for fun, but not for us to remember long term. Evan Daniels, better known as Spike, was created for the animated show X-Men Evolution, and that's pretty much the only place he is. There was a version of him brought into the comics, but that guy was loosely based on Evan. There were backstory similarities, but that was pretty much it. Spike's powers have to do with his bones. He can create bone spikes anywhere on his body and then throw them at things. He later created bone armor that was self-repairing and could use his spikes to climb walls and stuff. His weakness is loss of calcium. Regrowing your bones all the time and throwing them around means his calcium levels are low, so he drinks a lot of milk. Poster Child Forgot Milk campaign. I know that his weakness is that he has to replenish with milk, but I think that can also serve as mental warfare. If I was in the middle of a fight with someone and instead of water they stopped and took a swig of milk, I'm off my game. That would haunt me forever. Every time he throws his bones, we don't see a wound, so he probably has some sort of healing factor. The character has good bones, figuratively and literally, so why isn't he appearing in the mainstream comic universe? Well, his power set is quite similar to the pre-existing character Marrow, so that unfortunately might have something to do with it. The last time he was seen was 2003 in the finale of the show. Robin Vega appeared in Spider-Man 82 and 83 in 1997, and that's all. Literally nothing since then. She is a mutant, but maybe since she wasn't in the actual X-Men comics, Marvel has pushed her away. Her mutant ability is metal mimicry. She can make herself metal. It's living metal, so she can move and stretch her body parts around and even make her limbs weapons. She can melt herself down into a liquid or stay solid, it's up to her. And because she's metal, she's bulletproof. The powers are super cool, which is why Marvel has used very similar ideas with other characters. They're not exactly the same but different. Other metal mutants include Colossus, Mercury, and Flex. So the market is pretty saturated. The Spider-Man 83 comic ended with her literally just running off. Well, there are a few people out there who still remember her. It looks like Marvel might be sweeping her under the rug. She hasn't even been featured in more recent comics as one of those cameos of forgotten characters. Combo Man has shown up twice. Once semi-seriously, and the other was poking fun at the character. Combo Man was created because of a promotional agreement, which means he's really weird weird. The agreement was between Marvel, of course, and Eagle Snacks. He is a combo of a bunch of different Marvel heroes, and that means he has all their powers too. Combo Man is the hero, the human inside of him is Rick Wilder. Rick was a kid and he turns into Combo Man when he was near a lab explosion. Rick happened, at the time, to be carrying a Marvel comic book and Eagle Company snack brand Combo Snacks. Of course, these two things combined with Rick and he is now Combo Man. If you want to check it out, Combo Man has one issue, it's just called Combo Man. His only other appearance was in Ziggy Pig Silly Seal comic at a Comic-Con in a back alley alongside a bunch of other weird forgotten Marvel characters. I count Combo Man as a mutant because quite a few mutants were part of the lineup that created him, like Cyclops and Magneto. Changeling is known for a few things, but you might maybe remember him either pretending to be Professor X or Elvis. Yeah, the Changeling's mutant ability is shapeshifting, but specifically the metamorph strain as he is limited to humans. He had basic telepathy, but that was then boosted by Professor X. He used to just be able to influence people, now he can read minds and make you think his thoughts. Professor X boosted him and he pretended to be Professor X because the real Professor X needed to go prepare to fight an alien invasion. But Professor X couldn't just disappear, so enter Changeling. He did die as Professor X and was buried as Professor X. It was when he was brought back as a zombie that we got the Elvis moment. Zombie Changeling was helping out She-Hulk by providing a distraction, and that distraction was Elvis. He then went 6 feet under again shortly after. Changeling was revamped with a new name in some other universes. He became Morph, and he got a lot more character development and, sorry, but more interesting plot lines that he got to be himself in. It seems Marvel wants the Changeling version to be left behind and Morph to get picked up instead. Coming in all the way from Hollywood is El Guapo. He was a mutant stuntman. He worked on X-Statix, the movie, which is also the name of the real-life comic series. El Guapo appeared in X-Statix 9 and then perished in issue 18. Here for a good time, not a long time. Marvel might want us to forget this mutant because the guy didn't, really have powers. Instead, he had a symbiotic relationship with, take a guess, not a symbiote. Good guess though, he's attached to a skateboard. A flying skateboard. It moves at his mental command and sometimes it even fights him. When El Guapo cheated on his girlfriend, the board beat him up and was later his cause of death. He was impaled on his skateboard. It's all a little ridiculous, so it's not much of a surprise that Marvel has left El Guapo alone after his death. I feel bad for calling the mutant Ugly John, so I'm going to refer to him by the name he introduced himself as, Steve. Steve is a mutant with 3 faces, that's all. No powers, just serving face. Since he doesn't really do anything, it's understandable that he hasn't been revived since his tragic death in New X-Men 115. His first appearance was New X-Men 114. He wasn't around for a good time or a long time, poor Steve. The last early mutant standing without the help of Resurrection is Gabriel Shephard. His character is pretty interesting. He's a proto-mutant, an early version of mutants whose X gene was less evolved. There weren't many of these guys to start out with, and Gabriel was the last one standing as he looked the most human and was the most powerful. The other proto-mutants had been getting revived to be used as weapons, and Gabriel found out by reading the mind of an X-Men, and he was not happy. He dispersed himself into pure energy, unhappy. This guy is super powerful. He was thought to maybe even be an Omega level mutant. He is immortal, he has super strength and hearing, has telepathic abilities, and can stop you from using telepathic abilities on him. He can fly, he can manipulate matter to make it something else, healing powers, he, like a power plant, he can generate electricity and even stop time. That is so many things. Why isn't he a bigger deal? I raise you. Does Marvel want us to forget him, or is the omnipotent Omega level mutant using his power to make us forget him? When you look at it, the poor guy just seems to want to live his life out of the spotlight. He's been around for hundreds of years. He had to have known about the X-Men, yet he chose to stay hidden. He doesn't really want to use his powers. Maybe we should forget about him, just to let the poor guy rest. I did a video on the history of Magneto recently, and in that we briefly touched on the Magneto clone Joseph. He really had us all convinced he was the real Magneto for a minute there. In his defense, he was a clone of Magneto and he had amnesia, so he did his best. Joseph just is Magneto. Everything Magneto can do, he can do too. He also does his best at causing problems. He's died a few times, but then again, so have most Marvel characters. The first time he was resurrected, he framed Magneto for eliminating a bunch of people. He tried to bring Magneto back to his reign of terror. He's resurrected again after dying again. He keeps impersonating Magneto. It seems that Marvel only remembers and wants us to remember Joseph when they want to bring Magneto back without bringing Magneto back. Remember, Magneto died, actually this time, but then Magneto was spotted. Oops, sorry, that was Joseph again. Joseph was also already dead, but it's easier to just bring him back apparently. Irena Clayton hasn't been seen since her single panel appearance in Legion of X9. She was only there for a second though. Don't get me wrong, she slayed, speaking literally and figuratively. She got a total redesign, so if they hadn't explicitly said it was her, honestly, I wouldn't have been sure. She's a lot scarier now, but that's just because of a monster spell, so hopefully it's not permanent. Her mutant ability is extra mouths on her neck. The extra mouths let her project her voice so it sounds like she is everywhere. I want to know if she can sing in 4-part harmony, because if so, she should have gone into show business. Maybe that's what she was doing, because honestly, Irena doesn't do that much. Like, for the most part, she's just a student at the school that appears in the background. She did help confuse some people who were trying to break into the school, but her appearance in Legion of X is the first time she actually gets her hands dirty, that we get to see at least. This panel also confirms that she does sing. Wouldn't it be wild if she was gone because she was a backup singer for Dazzler's World Tour or something? Anyway, Marvel really must want Qui-Gon because they made a new one. Seriously, the mutant known as Scream changed her name to Choir, quite recently too. I guess Irena is really being put on vocal rest.
When Spider-Man villain The Spot showed up and announced his title, Spider-Man quite literally fell over in hysterics before getting his spider butt handed to him. But The Spot is actually a pretty cool name, especially when you compare it to our first villain of the day, Mr. Fish. Mr. Fish was originally a petty crook who was exposed to radiation while out on a job, and he then fell into the East River. He emerged from the nasty New York waters as a half-fish, half-man hybrid with pretty impressive superhuman strength. Mr. Fish may look absolutely hilarious with an even funnier name, but he managed to create his own branch of the crime family known as the Magia, and he even created a decent criminal following before Luke Cage stopped him. Despite being actually somewhat impressive though, he is just a touch bit too weird to really work as a lasting villain, and I mean, he calls himself Mr. Fish, so there's that. Moving on, Pulp Fiction villain Dr. Fu Manchu was a mad scientist and mystic created in 1913 by British novelist Sax Rohmer. The character was built on stereotypes with traits like slanted eyes, a gaunt face, silk clothing, and long fingers paired with a Halloween goatee and an insatiable desire to conquer Western society. He was made to be basically a boogeyman who epitomizes fears about Asian peoples. The character became so entrenched in society that when Marvel writer Steve Englehart and artist Jim Starlin wanted to create Shang-Chi in 1972, Marvel acquired the legal rights to Fu Manchu and made him Shang-Chi's evil father in the comic book series Master of Kung Fu in 1973. It's pretty similar to how Marvel's The Mandarin first appeared and leaned heavily into stereotypes as well. But Marvel has not had the rights to Fu Manchu since the final issue of Masters of Kung Fu in 1983, so since then, comic book writers have found roundabout solutions to Shang-Chi's father, like in Jean Luen Yang's ongoing series Shang-Chi, he is now his own entity named Shang-Tzu, but he still kept a majority of the traits that Fu Manchu had. Then there was the Shang-Chi movie, which completely changed Shang-Tzu to be an incredibly compelling, deep, and powerful character who had none of the stereotypical traits possessed by Fu Manchu, and Marvel could finally breathe a sigh of relief, even if they can't really escape the fact that they pulled the racism. Now, there are only one or two characters that go by the name Belladonna in Marvel Comics. The one most people are familiar with is Belladonna Boudreaux, who is the ex-wife of the X-Men's Gambit and a member of the New Orleans Assassins Guild. But the Belladonna I'm talking about today was actually Narda Ravana, a European fashion designer. This Lady Belladonna had a problem with Roderick Kingsley, who would go go on to become the Spider-Man villain Hobgoblin. Now Roderick was another famous fashion designer, only he was one that stole from other designers. Kingsley allegedly stole Ravonna's designs and marketed them in the United States, stealing her success, and for that, I guess he had to pay. Swearing vengeance, Narda assumed the guise of Belladonna and put together a small group of henchmen. She used toxic gas that could dissolve Spider-Man's webs and take people's lives, and she even had her henchmen dress up as the villain the Prowler to distract Spider-Man, all for the end goal of wiping Kingsley off the face of the earth. Unfortunately though, Belladonna just didn't have the popularity needed to be a lasting villain. She got arrested in 1980, while Kingsley became the Hobgoblin, and he's been causing problems all the way up until 2020 and is bound to come back at some point as well. Armed with a hate ray, the Hate Monger set himself up as a notable rabble-rousing villain who enticed fear and bigotry among American citizens, specifically against visible minorities. He also caused political instability in South America, which made him an enemy of the CIA, and he gave extremely bigoted speeches in New York City, which brought him into the sights of the Fantastic Four. This all made him pretty problematic in his earlier appearances, especially given the fact that he dressed primarily in a big pointy hood evocative of a certain group of incredibly bigoted people who I don't think I can talk about on YouTube. Do you know who else I can't talk about on YouTube? A certain man with a tiny mustache from Germany who is pretty prominent in world history, and he is exactly who Hate Monger is. Or I should say, Hate Monger is a clone of that man created by Arnim Zola. Despite that, Hate Monger has been a pretty lasting villain, having gone through multiple similar costumes, multiple different bodies, and he even eventually got recreated as a being of living psychoactive energy by the Red Skull using a cosmic cube. But at the same time, he seems to be a rather obscure and little known villain, and I think that may be partially by design. Next up, the Spider-Man villain known as Mindworm is honestly just a really sad story. William Turner, no, not like the guy from Pirates of the Caribbean, accidentally took his mother's life using his unconscious vampiric psionic feeding abilities. This act caused his father to go into emotional shock and run in front of a car. So, as you can imagine, this was extremely upsetting for William, as he did actually deeply care for both of his parents, and he didn't even know that he was a mutant when the incident occurred. Now, William isn't even a normal Marvel mutant. His mutation was a result of an experimental compound being stored near the hospital where he was born, which resulted in his massive head, which was the butt of a lot of jokes and bullying. William grew up in an orphanage before eventually moving into a shack in New York City, where he would feed off the emotions of the nearby tenants without actually taking their lives. One of these tenants was Peter Parker, and the two ended up fighting each other. Now, although Mindworm reformed, he was exploited by other criminals, and after being released from prison for another time, he became homeless and refused to use his abilities to defend himself for fear of hurting people, so eventually, before Peter Parker could help him, William's life was taken by a street gang, and he hasn't been seen since. Now listen, some villains are just a sign of the times. Asbestos is incredibly heat and fire resistant, and back in the day, we really used to take advantage of the mineral. It was in thousands of products, and it even came into our comic books with the super villain known as Asbestos Lady, who was fittingly a villain for the original Human Torch, the android Jim Hammond. Victoria Murdoch created herself a costume made entirely of asbestos, which basically made her immune to fire when she wore it. Now, since it is no longer back in the day, we now know that asbestos is actually incredibly carcinogenic. Not only does it cause mesothelioma, but it can also cause a lung disease called asbestosis. Of course, neither the writers of the comics nor the villain herself actually knew that at the time, but that didn't save Victoria, as she eventually did pass away at the age of 45 thanks to idiopathic mesothelioma. Kind of surprisingly, Marvel created Asbestos Man after the fact, a guy known as Orson Karloff, who had no connection to Asbestos Lady other than also wearing an armored suit of asbestos, and he actually survived his cancer but continued wearing the armor, just this time he dragged around an air canister to keep him alive as he did so. He was unwilling to fight anyone, and everyone was afraid to even go near him, which led to an hours-long standoff with the Great Lake Avengers before eventually just surrendering and then apparently dying at a later date, probably from asbestos. Now, Spider-Man has a lot of villains, and a lot of those villains have animal-based names and powers. A lot of these villains are super cool and intimidating. We have Rhino, Dr. Octopus, Vulture, Scorpion, etc, etc, but some of them are just a little bit ridiculous, and possibly the most ridiculous would have to be the Kangaroo. We have had two different kangaroos. The first was Frank Oliver. Frank was an Australian boxer, but not just that. He was an Australian boxer who naturally lived with and grew up among kangaroos. And it was all because he just really liked kangaroos. Now, while living among them, he developed a ridiculously impressive ability to jump, and that is what led him to a career of boxing, which makes no sense to me. When he went to the United States without a passport, he used his ability to jump to both escape custody and to embrace a life of crime, and this led to him fighting Spider-Man. Unfortunately for Oliver, he entered a room containing a dangerous amount of radiation, which actually reduced him to a pile of ash. But don't worry, he was replaced by interior decorator Brian Hibbs, who trained to get a similar jumping ability but also augmented this by donning the most embarrassingly bad kangaroo mech suit I have ever seen in my life. And I haven't seen a lot of kangaroo mech suits, so I don't know of any actually, now that I think about it. Now, I have spoken about the villain Lifeform before, and while I absolutely unironically love this character, I really don't think that Marvel will ever bring him back. But the fun thing is, they totally and very easily could. The son of a fanatical right-wing libertarian saw George trained by his father to prepare him for the world. Although he wanted to be an actor, George was convinced to become a scientist by his father, who also got George a job at Advanced Idea Mechanics, or AIM. But his father didn't know that this would inadvertently get George exposed to the pro-gamma virus. This virus mutated George into this grotesque monster, becoming known as the Lifeform. Now, Lifeform has superhuman strength, durability, a healing factor, and he can survive in water and the vacuum of space. He even caused Frank Castle the Punisher to run away from him because his weapons had literally no effect on him. Eventually, Frank Castle knocked him into a river with a rocket, but George came back anyways, now with two different personalities. One his normal peaceful self, and the other being the monster Lifeform. George now came into conflict with Daredevil, but this time he was more of a confused monster, and eventually, in an altercation with police, his heart began beating so fast that he just collapsed and then dissolved into a puddle. While he did eventually reform, he was put into battle against the Hulk by the alien Mercy, who also turned him back into an actual human man again. But this wouldn't last, as he remutated and attacked an entire hospital. S.H.I.E.L.D. contacted Mr. Fantastic, who was actually incapacitated at the time, so then the Silver Surfer took George to a dead planet destroyed by Galactus and just left him there, as he couldn't really bring himself to put an end to this guy, but he didn't want to bring him back into society. And that is the last we ever saw of Lifeform. Just out on the remnants of a dead planet, one part of him wanting to just go to the end of time, and the other half growing more and more hungry as he just sits there. Now, when it comes to Wolverine, his backstory seems to be a bottomless pit of never-ending inspiration for Marvel writers, but after a while that kind of started to get stale. To prove that point, we are going to talk about Romulus. Romulus was basically another mysterious evil mastermind behind the Weapon X project. He was the one to raise Daken as a ruthless assassin, and he gave Cyber his adamantium skin, and he had been secretly manipulating Logan his entire life. Basically, if you take Sabretooth, give him some salt and pepper hair tied up in a top knot with Wolverine-like adamantium claws, and you basically got yourself one Romulus. Romulus claimed that he, Wolverine, Sabretooth, and these other feral-like mutants were a species of human that were descended from wolves instead of apes. But then, that was apparently just a lie used to manipulate Wolverine even more. Logan eventually learned that Romulus's grand scheme was for Logan and Daken to fight to decide who would take Romulus's place at the top of the food chain. And I think it's safe to say that a large majority of readers really just didn't care at all, as his character had a lot to do with a part of Logan's life that we had already closed the books on back in the 90s. Now, our last pick for today even rebranded himself, and it couldn't save him from being a laughingstock. Paste Pot Pete, or Peter Petruski, patented a multi-polymer adhesive that actually led to him becoming very wealthy. But being being a complete doofus, instead of actually following that success, Peter decided to instead try and be a supervillain, using his invention to successfully rob a bank. Now following that, Pete decided to level up from robbing banks to stealing a Delta Cosmic missile from the military. And thanks to the Human Torch, and the fact that his only thing is super glue, this was a humiliating failure. He quickly became a joke to the superhero community. He even rebranded himself to the Trapster, which is a much better name, but that is completely overshadowed by his time as Paste Pot Pete. The character himself can't even handle being called that anymore. Hearing the name actually causes him to go into a rage and is totally listed as one of his weaknesses on his wiki page. Despite his hilarious past, Trapster has been a recurring villain for years, although he is almost never taken seriously.
Seline Gallo is a centuries-old mutant psychic vampire and a major antagonist in Marvel Comics. Also known as the Black Queen, she is a longtime member of the Hellfire Club and as such has often tormented the X-Men and their allies. She also fought Captain America and the Daughters of Liberty. She's immortal, she possesses great magical powers, she can just manipulate shadows and darkness, she can drain the life force from any living being that comes into contact with her skin, she's pretty cool. After a failed attempt to sacrifice the population of ancient Rome to make herself a god, she founded Nova Roma, an isolated colony modeled after ancient Rome that survived into modern times in Brazil's Amazon rainforest. She maintains her immortality with her mutant power because she likes to absorb the essence or life force of others. She can also absorb memories and take control of people this way. So by drawing on the power she's absorbed, she can grant herself superhuman abilities, enhanced strength, speed, whatever she needs. Oh, did I mention she's a telepath with very, very good telekinetic abilities? Combine all of this, and you've also got her lovely extended lifespan. She's become one of the most skilled magic users in the world, and I think at one point she was even considered a potential candidate to replace Doctor Strange as Sorcerer Supreme. So that's how you get a great antagonist in the New Mutant series, and also the whole Necrosha story arc. Soft Serve's sole mutant ability is to defecate ice cream, controlling the flavor she creates and how much she serves, making her a mutant with pretty much zero inherent fighting capabilities. She was first introduced in a background moment in Way of X, issue number 2, and artist Bob Quinn later elaborated on her powers with a detailed sketch on Twitter. So originally he's like, yeah, she's got different plumbing from baseline humans, but later amended that her body is a portal to the ice cream dimension, and the phrase defecating is more about the unfortunate placement of the portal's exit than her actual biological process. Soft Serve, by the way, is not the only mutant with ice cream related powers. You've also got to consider Ice Cream, who can turn himself into any flavor of ice cream. Yeah, ice cream. Alright. According to Bob Quinn, there's no relation between the two, but Soft Serve is a big fan of ice cream. Just don't confuse the two, everybody, because it's easy to do. Sketch has the mutant ability to reshape reality by altering it upon her sketch pad. She can only affect non-organic matter with this power, fashioning metallic tendrils, metallic sheaths, and obviously she needs to be able to see an object in order to affect it. Thankfully for us, she carries around bags full of sketch pads and pencils at all times. In terms of what history we know about her, I think she was held prisoner in Russia by mutant traders until being saved by the X-Men. Oh, and before his abrupt departure from writing Uncanny X-Men, Chris Claremont did intend for Sketch to join the X-Men, but now I got nothing for her. Having the physical attributes of a fish, Sammy Perret, or Squid Boy, was the perfect target for bullies. Now intent on stopping the harassment, Sammy plotted to kill his tormentors, but thankfully a meeting with Professor X saved Sammy from the potentially deadly showdown, and he was like, yeah, I'll enroll at the Xavier Institute instead. Well, en route to the Institute with Professor Xavier, he was like, hey, I can't contact anybody. So they took a detour over to Ireland to help with a mission, and upon investigating, we found ourselves assisting Juggernaut. And then Juggernaut and Sammy became good friends after Sammy saved Juggernaut's life. Kane became a surrogate father to Sammy, but then when Sammy's mother found out about his relationship with Kane, she called Alpha Flight to bring Sammy back home to her. And there, Sammy was going through some harm. Really not great. But then Juggernaut was like, hey, I'm gonna come visit. And well, Juggernaut took care of the attacker and was subsequently arrested by Alpha Flight, the big superheroes in Canada. Oh, did I mention Sammy's from Vancouver? After that, Sammy's mother left the bad guy, Sammy returned to the Institute, and good time. Later on, Juggernaut infiltrated Brotherhood of Evil, working as a double agent, but Sammy stumbled upon that group meeting and he's like, oh my gosh, Juggernaut's betraying the X-Men. So he lashed out at him, causing the group's leader, Black Tom Cassidy, to sadly kill the young mutant, pulping him. Eventually, Sammy became a candidate for resurrection by the Five, and when Kane heard that Sammy's resurrection was coming on the queue, he made it a point to be there to welcome him, and to apologize for how things kinda went previously. Jazz, the guy with the power to have blue skin. Not even the power to turn off the blue, just blue skin. Real name John Xander. His dream was to be a rapper, but he wasn't really good. And while in Mutant Town, he was a runner for one of the crime lords of the area, selling toad juice, a substance made from the secretions of Toad Boy. And after M-Day, he was one of the few mutants to retain his mutant powers and appearance, but then was forcibly relocated to the mutant camp, where he was killed by fellow mutant and tent mate Johnny D, thanks to a miniature voodoo doll that Johnny made from a DNA sample. So remember Spat and Grovel, the acquaintances of Gambits who appeared in a couple of issues of Uncanny around the trial times? They had the action figures that were part of the Marvel's Most Wanted. Well, if you remember them, good on you. Do you remember that third person with them? The one that we only had for a couple of panels? His name was Landscape. He was a mutant bounty hunter with the power to create holographic environments, and that's all we really know about him. Equus, also known as Danny, was a metamorph who was able to transform his body into an equine state with horse-like speed that resembled a winged centaur. So while in the state he had flight, he had horse-like speed, really great. History on Danny: his father worked as a government scientist before he had an accident in the lab, and then retired to raise horses in Texas. So Danny was born a mutant, grew up tending to horses, and then he felt that kinship. So when he was in his mutant form, he would run with the horses. He would take the horses to be shown at state fairs, one such being the Texas State Fair, and that's where he was detected by both Magneto and Professor Xavier's mutant locating hardware. So Magneto got there first and was like, I dub you Equus, the latest soldier in my crusade. And upon the arrival of the X-Men, Magneto was like, hey Danny, they're the bad guys, they're here to kidnap you. So he took on his mutant form and fought alongside Magneto against them. Now when Magneto carelessly injured Danny's horses, Danny turned against him and with the aid of the X-Men, defeated him. Danny elected to stay in Texas after this, but the X-Men did leave him a little card for the Xavier Institute, so the door's not completely closed. As part of Gene Nation, a group of Morlock whom Storm encountered and relocated to Africa, Boost was a mutant who kind of functioned like a living battery cell. He could augment other mutants' powers by a process called body jumping, where he would merge with them and boost their powers. So when humanity's last stand attacked the former Gene Nationals at their new home, Storm, the X-Men, the Brotherhood all arrived to offer the mutants protection against their enemies. Humanity's last stand was eventually defeated, and Boost, along with somebody else, they were like, yeah, let's get out of here. They helped the Brotherhood escape in return for being, well, dropped off at an unrevealed place of their choosing. Sadly, Boost was affected by M-Day, lost his mutant powers, but was somehow repowered and then became a citizen of Krakoa, and was suggested as a potential replacement for Cortez in Sword, but other than that, don't have a lot. Mother Inferior was a member of the Morlocks, the outcasts, the community of mutants who lived in the tunnels beneath New York City, and her power, kinda handy in this situation, she had the ability to communicate with and control rats and other vermin types of creatures. Handy when you live in the tunnels underneath a rat-infested city, scary if you're me. Well, most folks had been killed in the mutant mass extinction event. A couple of folks escaped, a few with the help of X-Men and whatnot, and Mother Inferior and her family. Part of that, they came across Anna in the old Poseidon. They helped take care of Pester's offspring until one day, Spider-Man's like, hey, I'm here to investigate some stuff. And Spider-Man thought the Morlocks were threatening Anna's descendant, and he was like, oh, I'm gonna rescue this little thing. But then he found out that it belonged to the Morlocks, and naturally Mother Inferior fought him. So I think, correct me if I'm wrong folks, I think she's now dead because Firebrand had that whole building collapse thing. TBD. So you might think you're familiar with Thumbelina, but we're not here to talk about the Don Bluth adaptation today. This mutant first made her appearance with the now defunct team known as the Mutant Liberation Front, the MLF. And although very loyal to her teammates and part of the team since the get-go, she was often just a source of humor to them. I don't think she took part in a lot of active missions unless she was really needed, because sadly her size and slow movement was usually more of a hindrance than helpful. Like, don't get me wrong, when it came to espionage missions, she was really great. Her ability to shrink down to like 1/4 of an inch allowed her to get into places and access things that most of us can't. So she was able to save the team, she was good in a crunch. She would later help out the X-Force in a battle along with a short-lived revamp of the MLF, and she teamed up to help destroy some menaces, but then after that she would just like poof off and we didn't really know where she'd go. Currently, I think her whereabouts are unknown, but we do know that she does still have her mutant powers after all the M-Day stuff, so maybe we'll see her.
Of all the things in our galaxy, I think most of us can agree that the sun is pretty darn powerful. It's pretty crucial to life and could also very easily end all life in no time at all. So needless to say, a being who is the living manifestation of the sun would be pretty powerful, right? Well, that's exactly what Apollo is. Apollo first appeared in Doctor Strange Volume 2, number 22 in January of 1977 after she learned that the creators were plotting to replace stars in order to gain power. She she created a human form and traveled to Earth to help Doctor Strange. She even saved the hero from an attack of the demon Visamajoris, using her ability to produce blasts of heat that are equivalent to the power of the sun. So needless to say, she could probably absolutely destroy anyone who is less powerful than a literal star. But despite that, at the end of the story, she actually lost her power and her memory, but instead fell in love with humans, because apparently we're just that great. Despite being a member of the Avengers for quite some time, the superhero known as Jack of Hearts seems to be one that is often forgotten about. Jack Hart was the son of a brilliant scientist, and on his mother's side, an alien, with her being a member of the Contraxian race. While he gained some advantages from his mother's alien heritage, his father had created a ridiculously efficient liquid sci-fi fuel called Zero Fluid. Exposure to Zero Fluid is what forced his body to undergo mutation, allowing him to project powerful beams of concussive energy from his body. Unfortunately, this energy was also notoriously hard for Jack to control, which led to the character becoming a pretty tragic one, with a fairly checkered past while still ultimately being an incredibly good-hearted person. His passing and resurrection was featured prominently in Avengers Disassembled, and he did have a pretty prominent relationship with Jennifer Walters' She-Hulk, so hopefully if that show gets a second season, we will see his character finally show up in the MCU, giving the hero the attention he deserves from the mainstream. Being an Asgardian and the actual brother of Thor, it's actually incredibly unfair how Balder the Brave has never been able to garner much of a spotlight for himself. Balder the Brave is the Asgardian god of light, which obviously gives him light-based powers, but he is also often seen with speed-based powers as well, as he is the most agile of all the Asgardians. In Norse mythology, it's Balder's passing that is supposed to actually kick off Ragnarok. He plays an important role in the mythology and has played a role in quite a few Asgardian Marvel stories, but he's just never been able to reach the heights of popularity that his half-brother Thor and adopted brother Loki are able to generate. I mean, he hasn't even showed up in the MCU until he was only slightly mentioned in the second season of the Loki TV show, and even that mention only pointed out that Balder, Odin's son, never gets recognized. But funnily enough, Balder is not the only seemingly neglected Asgardian. While Asgardian heroes like Thor, the Warriors 3, Heimdall, Valkyrie, and even Loki get tons of time in the spotlight, others like Kelda Stormrider get all but lost to history. Kelda is the Norse goddess of winter storms, ice, lashing rain, and churning clouds, which sounds very much like a power set that would put her in league with Thor himself. She possesses all the powers of Asgardians that we expect with enhanced attributes and abilities, and was even considered to be one of the higher ranking Asgardian gods, especially due to her gentle nature. Once she was resurrected by Thor after the Ragnarok cycle, she sought new experiences within Midgard and fell in love with her husband, Bill Cobb. Even though Kelda eventually bit the dust, her ghost still wasn't done fighting and even assisted Thor in the fighting against Kull Borson. Next up, Jack Kirby introduced Machine Man in Marvel's 10-issue adaptation of 2001: A Space Odyssey. As X-51, he was created by Dr. Abel Stack, being his 51st attempt that actually succeeded in creating artificial life. Unfortunately for everyone involved, Stack then lost his own life in the process, leaving X-51 to wander the planet alone. It was later on that Marvel would introduce X-51 to the main Marvel universe as Machine Man. X-51, now assuming the identity of Aaron Stack, vowed to fulfill his creator's dream of human and robot coexistence. He became a fugitive from the military in a world fearful of machines. His encounters were honestly pretty dark sometimes too, with one of his first outings having him face off against an extremist, dismantling and reprogramming a malevolent computer, and navigating a society suspicious of artificial beings. Despite having many run-ins with the Avengers, even being a part of both the main team and the West Coast Avengers, the character just never really got that much mainstream traction. Griffin Gogal was just an ordinary plumber with a smoking habit, doing his ordinary job when an elderly psychologist couldn't afford to pay the plumbing bill. So instead, this psychologist offered to cure Griffin's smoking habit through hypnosis. The psychologist was actually an alien, and the hypnosis had the added benefit of unlocking Griffin's superhuman abilities, which are basically just the same abilities as Superman and the ability to perform any skill at a quote ultra level. With his new powers, he went out to try and find a new purpose, applying to be a part of a bunch of different teams. It was with the Revengers though where he got himself arrested and he ended up in prison and hasn't really been seen again since 2016, as far as I can tell. The original hero named 3D Man made his debut in Marvel Premiere number 35 in April of 1977 as test pilot Chuck Chandler, who was kidnapped by Skrulls. Chandler sabotaged a Skrull spacecraft and fled, but unfortunately Chuck's brother Hal arrived just in time, wearing his sunglasses, to see Chuck disappear in a flash of light as the Skrull craft exploded. In an incredibly weird twist of events though, it turned out that Chuck became a two-dimensional being imprinted on Hal's sunglasses. When Hal concentrated, he could now somehow release Chuck and they would merge together into a being with 3 times the strength, speed, and stamina of a regular person. As might not be a surprise to some, the character did eventually fade into obscurity. But then, Delroy Garrett Jr., a disgraced Olympic athlete who decided to turn to religion, became the second equally obscure 3D man when he became the spokesperson for the Triune Understanding, a religious cult whose leader gave Delroy the powers of 3D Man. Miracle Man is a hero steeped in legal battles. Originally known as Marvel Man, this hero was created as a replacement for the original DC hero, Captain Marvel, or Shazam, when publishers Len Miller and Sons, who held the rights to reprint Fawcett Publications' Captain Marvel stories in the UK, were denied the rights to the character by DC Comics. Eventually, Marvel Comics gained the right to the character with Neil Gaiman as a writer, and so Miracle Man was born. An orphan named Mike Moran became the Air Force's choice for the experimental Project Zarathustra. This project created a superhuman from alien DNA and, using a device, implanted it into Mike's own consciousness. Now, whenever Mike says the word Kimota, he becomes Miracle Man, gaining superhuman strength, speed, stamina, and longevity, as well as flight, invulnerability, energy manipulation, telepathy, telekinesis, and the ability to just get better over time in powers, and apparently in his stories too. Though he was created as basically a copy of the character Shazam, Miracle Man is arguably leagues and bounds more powerful, able to do almost anything with his powers, not to mention his stories are much more powerful and mature than those of Billy Batson. Kelsey Leigh Kirkland was a normal school teacher until she was caught on the front line of a battle between the Avengers and the Wrecking Crew. She used Captain America's shield to save her family and Captain America from a blow, causing her extensive injuries, but because of her bravery, she was reborn on Otherworld, where she was chosen by Brian Braddock, the original Captain Britain, to inherit the mantle and powers of Captain Britain. Wielding the Sword of Might and swearing to protect her homeland from evil, her time as Captain Britain was marked by a ruthless dedication to justice, and she battled adversaries like Morgan Le Fay and the Wrecking Crew. It was then that she realized that her heroic identity came with a huge consequence, being that if she revealed her true identity to her children, it would endanger their lives. Under the codename Lionheart, Kelsey sought out revenge against the former Captain Britain for what had happened to her, and in the end, she learned the error of her ways and let go of the mantle to be a mother to her children once again. The iconic Marvel sidekick Rick Jones is a staple of the Marvel Universe. He is most notably the close friend of Bruce Banner, and kind of the whole reason that Bruce even became the Hulk. Rick's biggest claim to fame is being the guy Bruce had to go and save from the Gamma explosion, which then gave Bruce his smashing persona. But the thing that people don't really know is that Rick got his own Hulk-like persona, and he named himself A-Bomb. After being exposed to a weapon powered by gamma radiation designed for use against the Hulk, Jones was mutated by intelligentsia into hulking out into a form similar to the Abomination. Jones's skin takes on a scaly sort of appearance, his eyes change color, and his hair just disappears. He gains an extra 4 feet and 1,800 pounds, and now, as a Hulk, Rick actually sets himself apart not just in his appearance, but even with gaining an extra power to camouflage himself at will, blending into the background. He was actually pretty important to a few stories, but eventually found himself cured of radiation by Doc Green, which took away his hulking out ability. Just like most iconic superheroes, Hobie Brown started out as a window washer. Okay, yeah, we're off to a great start today. Okay, so Hobart here got caught in the middle of a fight between Stiltman and Daredevil. He was actually inspired by Stiltman's suit, and so he decided to become the Prowler. Hobart Brown was the first Prowler, and after accidentally thinking he took the life of Peter Parker, he confessed everything to Spider-Man and decided to start fighting villains instead. Hobie then had a lot of interaction with Spider-Man. He impersonated the web slinger, but to help Peter retain his secret identity, he fought Spider-Man when he believed the hero had wiped out Captain Stacy, and he had his costume stolen by multiple dudes who impersonated him, who were caught by Spider-Man. And most recently, he debuted as the Hornet with a new suit and helped fend off the symbiote invasion using hacked Stark phones to broadcast a high-frequency sound to repel the symbiotes away. The Kasani Native American tribe had been using selective breeding and shamanistic magic for 10 generations to ensure the proper heir would be born to inherit great physical prowess. Thomas Fireheart was the result of all that effort. As the protector of his tribe, he gained the ability to undergo a transformation, turning him into a werecat. As Puma, he is an internationally known professional assassin and mercenary. But what really threw me for a loop was this next part. Thomas's tribe had an ancient prophecy that foretold of a powerful being, and that their hero, the Puma, would have the power to oppose this being. That being was the Beyonder. But funnily enough, when he reached a state of harmonious enlightenment with the universe, Thomas was imbued with immeasurable power. Unfortunately though, self-doubt, spurred on by Spider-Man, actually caused him to lose the fight with the Beyonder. Jericho Drum, 1, has a really cool name, but 2, is the master practitioner of voodoo white magic according to the Book of Ashanti, and he has been stated as one of the most powerful mystic practitioners on the planet. Which is why it makes sense that he was the one to become the new Sorcerer Supreme for a while in Doctor Strange's place after the Eye of Agamotto deemed that Jericho possessed a pure heart and a clean soul. Dr. Voodoo's main magical ability allows him to interact with spirits for a number of different effects. He can summon skeletons, the spirits of the dead, and can manipulate zombies with his necromancy. He can manipulate biological forces like animals and trees, as well as heal others, and he has even removed Frank Castle's mouth one time, which honestly, I wish more people would do. Dr. Voodoo also has a degree of pyrokinesis. He can control a voodoo smoke/mist and can manipulate and control people's souls, and that is all on top of the normal mystical abilities he possesses through spells, and that was actually increased in potential when he was trained by Doctor Strange and became the Sorcerer Supreme for a little while. Omega the Unknown is one of the wildest superhero concepts I have ever heard of. So basically, back in 1975, Howard the Duck and Man-Thing creator Steve Gerber created mechanical beings who lived out on a planet called Protaris, who were going to be wiped out due to changes to their planet's climate that they just couldn't adapt to. So they created biological humanoid beings who could succeed them, and they sent these beings off to other sentient worlds where they could learn and gain skills that they would then pass on to the next model, constantly improving. James Michael Starling was the final model who was sent to Earth. He had a psychic connection to the previous model, X3Z, who had gained the power of harnessing biospheric energy, which was then passed to James Michael Starling, and the Protarians, who knew this power would be too much for the creations, decided to set out to now destroy them. The character, as you can probably tell, was absolutely wild, but he really didn't stick with readers, with X3Z getting destroyed by the police in Las Vegas and James completely vaporizing himself until he came back revealed to be stuck in Chthon's other realm in Darkhold Omega in 2022. As the leader of the Runaways, a member of A-Force, a former Masters of Evil in training, and the professor of creative spellcrafting at Strange Academy, Nico Manuro, aka Sister Grimm, is both weirdly unheard of by casual comic readers and really varied in her experiences. Her parents, along with the other Runaways' parents, were part of a mystical cult that performed sacrifices, and the Runaways formed in direct opposition to this. Nico herself has a magical aptitude, being able to cast flight, telekinesis, teleportation, and shielding spells all on her own with minimal training, but specifically she relies heavily upon a magical artifact called the Staff of One, or the Witchbreaker's Staff, but it has a pretty major limitation: the fact that it doesn't allow its wielder to cast the same spell twice. It will either just do nothing, or what is arguably worse, cast a completely random spell. I'm assuming that having to constantly work around this probably is what gave her the necessary experience to become Professor of Creative Spellcasting. Damon Hellstrom was born when the demon Marduk Kyrios, who also goes by the name of Satan, decided to have a child with a human woman as a way of accessing even greater power. After learning of his heritage, Hellstrom decided to turn his back on his father and vowed to fight against him, even eventually slaying his father and taking lordship over the dimension of Hell. Hellstrom has a Cambion physiology and wields crazy magical abilities, as well as commanding vast power in the Hell dimension itself. That Cambion physiology I mentioned gives Hellstrom super strength and durability, and due to his dark soul, he has shapeshifting and teleportation abilities as well as magical awareness. Hellstrom has also wielded a trident made of netherranium, which is a psychosensitive metal found only in his extra-dimensional hell realm. While also being a pointy trident, the weapon is also a medium through which magical energies can be amplified and projected. All of his magical abilities and connection to the world of demons made him an excellent occult expert and made him a perfect fit for the Midnight Suns. Now, some characters in comic books are created to be jokes. For me, that makes them the best obscure characters because you don't even have to feel bad for them, ever. Frogman is Eugene Patillo, the son of the former supervillain Leapfrog. His father Vincent battled Daredevil multiple times with his frog suit, which gave him the ability to leap great heights, courtesy of electrical coils in his boots, and that's the only power he had. So, he got defeated so many times that he retired from supervillainy. Eugene was constantly bullied for his father's failures and eventually decided to take revenge on his bullies by wearing one of his father's old Leapfrog costumes, but Eugene decided to instead try and redeem his father's name by becoming the heroic Frogman. In the beginning, Frogman was more of an annoyance or distraction to other superheroes, but despite that, he has managed to defeat the likes of Speed Demon, White Rabbit, Walrus, Toad, Yellow Claw, and Flag Smasher, usually through sheer luck. Shroud is a pretty mysterious character in Marvel Comics who has come a long way from where he started. Orphaned at the age of 10 after witnessing the passing of his incredibly wealthy parents, Max Coleridge vowed to fight crime in any way he could, studying criminology and subjecting himself to a strict exercise regimen. He traveled through Asia and even studied for 7 years with a mysterious, sinister cult. Does any of this sound familiar? It's Batman. However, things took an interesting turn when the cult actually blinded Max and branded him with their mark. This granted Max a psychic perception that allowed him to see his environment within a radius of about 100 feet of him, even through solid walls. He went on to struggle really badly with his own sanity, and he gained Dark Force powers, upping his power levels, and more recently, he actually became the new Moon Knight, so hopefully that'll put him out of obscurity. Jason Strongbow was a man who tried to prevent developers from exploiting the environment that was sacred to his Navajo tribe. These developers just happened to be working in league with the villain Claw. When Jason and his brother Ward confronted Claw in the mines, the combination of radioactive rock and Claw's powerful sonics had the benefit of actually mutating Jason and his brother's genetic structure, giving Jason super strength, speed, and stamina, as well as incredibly strong senses, allowing him to see accurately at a distance of 800 feet. After gaining his powers, Jason took up the mantle of American Eagle, champion of the Navajo people. He and his brother then followed Claw to the Savage Land and defeated him with the help of Khazar and the Fantastic Four's The Thing. He opposed Tony Stark during the Civil War and fought against the Thunderbolts during Dark Reign, even paralyzing Bullseye, who was masquerading as Hawkeye at the time. And during the contest to decide who should gain the Phoenix Force, he actually defeated Luke Cage in combat before he was defeated by others. As iconic as a red, super intelligent dinosaur is, Devil Dinosaur is still actually pretty obscure when it comes to Marvel fans. Devil Dinosaur is a Tyrannosaurus Rex hailing from the alternate reality of Earth 78411, aka Dinosaur World. Now, in his youth, Devil Dinosaur was nearly consumed by a tribe of ruthless humans known as the Killer Folk, who inhabited this world. However, he was saved by Moon Boy, a young member of a rival tribe to the Killer Folk known as the Small Folk, which is kinda cute. Now, when Devil Dinosaur was exposed to the flames of the Killer Folk's fiery assault, the fiery baptism actually triggered a mutation within the dinosaur, granting him extraordinary powers beyond those of his kind. Specifically, it gave him the intelligence of an average human. Simultaneously, it also altered his once olive green skin to a striking and vibrant shade of flame red. Other than his intelligence and his red skin, Devil Dinosaur also exhibited unwavering loyalty to his companion, Moon Boy, who he shared a ton of adventures with, even eventually coming over to the main 616 Marvel Universe. Number 10. The S-Men. Red Skull, being the dastardly devil he is, made some backup plans in the case of his eventual demise. One such plan was a clone of himself who would come back in the modern era. Okay, side note, why do villains do this, making clones of themselves? The individual villain still kind of passes away, so if they move their consciousness or something, that kind of makes sense, but I don't get why this is a thing. But I'm pretty sure this clone isn't even like that. I'm gonna make myself upset, so let's just continue. Basically, waking up in this new modern world with mutants and all that jazz, this new Red Skull decided that he was going to dig up the body of Professor X and steal some of his brain. granting himself some telepathy, and as an antithesis to the X-Men, he created the S-Men. Yes, very creative. This was a group of individuals that the Red Skull had empowered using crazy mad science and magic. Almost all of them were pretty quickly taken out of existence by Magneto when this Red Skull tried to make a camp to exterminate mutants. Bad move, buddy. Bad move. Number 9. Zodiac Cartel. Honestly, it's a pretty cool idea for a group. This villainous group of hand-picked business leaders who were all born under different zodiac signs, as their leader Cornelius Van Lunt, or Taurus, was heavily into astrology. Each member, while representing a zodiac sign, also was based in a different American city, and their main goal was world economic and political domination. Its members originally were, other than Cornelius, Scorpio, Jake Fury, Aquarius, Darren Bentley, Aries, Marcus Lassiter, Cancer, Jack Cleveno, Capricorn, Willard Weir, Gemini, Joshua Link, Leo, Daniel Radford, Libra, Gustav Brandt, Pisces, Noah Perricone, Sagittarius, Harlan Vargas, and my representative, Virgo, Elaine McLaughlin. The team was first formed after the dissolution of a previous group called the Great Wheel of Zodiac, which had covert agents from around the globe including Baron von Strucker, Dum Dum Dugan, and even Leonardo da Vinci. Its dissolution also led to the creation of S.H.I.E.L.D., Hydra, and Leviathan as well, so you could definitely say it was important and somehow still relatively obscure. Number 8. Headmen. Sometimes it takes the smallest of things to bring people together, and while that may sound like an extremely beautiful sentiment, I'm saying it in relation to the villainous team known as the Headmen, who it seems came together because each of their powers revolves around their heads in one way or another, and it's honestly kind of unsettling in my opinion. Bonded together through their heads, these scientists sought out world domination, bringing them into conflict with the Defenders, She-Hulk, and Spider-Man. This quartet consisted of Arthur Nagin, their leader, who had his head transplanted onto the body of a gorilla, Ruby Thursday, who replaced her own head with an organic computer capable of changing shape, Gerald Morgan, aka Shrunken Bones, accidentally shrank his own skeleton, including his skull, so he basically has really baggy skin, and Chandu the Mystic's head has been transplanted by Nagin onto a number of different bodies throughout his time, making him quite versatile. Number 7. Circus of Crime. Fritz Tybalt, then manager and ringmaster of a small Austrian circus, became active in the Axis powers during World War II. He was asked by German intelligence to take his circus to the United States of America to give performances in major cities while actually using his circus members' powers and talents in order to take out government officials. Fritz Tybalt's evil circus of crime consisted of Omir the Snake Charmer, Tommy Thumb, the Trapeze Trio, and Zandow the Strongman. However, Tybalt, who came to be known as the Ringmaster of Death, was captured by Captain America. But fast forward, and the Circus of Crime's new MO was giving a performance to a large audience. Then the Ringmaster would use the powerful mind control device in his hat to put the audience into a trance. The circus members then robbed the audience, who would remember nothing about the thefts when the Ringmaster released them from the trance, and the performance continued. This criminal circus fought the Hulk, Spider-Man, the Hawkeyes, the Avengers, and others. Number 6. The UFOs. These villains and their cleverly chosen team names. UFOs, like UFOs, because they got their powers in space. Yes, of course. Someone get me out of here, please. Okay, the UFOs here, inspired by the powers gained by the Fantastic Four, went to great lengths trying to reproduce the same accident that gave those heroes their abilities. The attempt succeeded, but they were interrupted by Bruce Banner, who discovered their ground control facility and was able to bring the shuttle down, because he thought it had been exposed to the cosmic radiation by accident. They were none too happy, as they thought they could have been made even stronger if he had not interfered, and they displayed their newfound powers in a frankly pretty awesome fight with the Incredible Hulk, even if they lost. Vapor has the ability to alter her form into any known gas. Vector gained the power of telekinesis from cosmic rays. X-Ray has been permanently transformed into a living energy field with the power to expel forms of heavy radiation capable of hurting even the Hulk. Ironclad has been permanently transformed into organic metal steel. He has superhuman strength, durability, and the ability to decrease or increase his own weight. His fight with the Hulk literally shook the universe, which is super cool. You should probably check him out. Number 5, the Frightful Four. A second group inspired by the Fantastic Four. Yes, the Frightful Four also did not come up with a very clever name. The Wizard, the Sandman, and Paste Pot Pete, who all regularly did battle with the Human Torch and were defeated by him around the same time, realized that they all had unique powers and a mutual disdain for the Fantastic Four. The Wizard suggested that they form a group that would be the evil counterparts to the Fantastic Four. A great idea, but it's just 3 dudes. They need a 4th member to their group, and what do you know, the Wizard had heard of a strange woman hiding out on a remote island on the Mediterranean who had complete control of her hair. Traveling there, the Wizard convinced Madame Medusa to join their ranks. Now this Madame Medusa was actually Medusa of the Inhumans, as some of you may have guessed, but she was kept under the influence of the Wizard using a device that kept her memories forgotten to her. They made their first attack at Mr. Fantastic and Invisible Woman's engagement party, which is kinda just rude if you ask me. Number 4, Wrecking Crew. When Dirk Garthwaite, otherwise known as Wrecker, held onto his enchanted crowbar, he invited his 3 chums, ex-physicist Dr. Elliot Franklin, ex-Army Master Sergeant Henry Camp, and ex-farmhand Brian Kalusky to come and do the same in the middle of a thunderstorm. When lightning struck the crowbar, all 3 men were empowered, becoming Thunderball, Bulldozer, and Piledriver respectively, and coming together to be the villainous Wrecking Crew. These mystical strongmen were mainly an enemy to Thor, but they originally fought against the Defenders. This group has actually been around for a pretty long time and have battled many a superhero. The Fantastic Four, Avengers, Omega Flight, Spider-Man, the Thunderbolts, and even got into a fight between the Marvel and DC universes. Number 3, Menagerie. The Menagerie is likely a more recent evil team, showing up for the first time in Amazing Spider-Man Volume 3, Number 1 in April of 2014, when they tried to steal valuable decorated eggs from an antique store and were pretty easily defeated. So like, from the get-go, the impressive feats are on the lower side of the list, if you know what I'm saying. In fact, I'd say the most famous thing they've done is when they disintegrated Spider-Man's spider suit, making him have to create web underwear for himself. And it's kind of the underwear that is remembered here, not the menagerie. The animal-themed criminal team was created by White Rabbit, and its members included Hippo, Ox, Skyne, who did the spider suit disintegrating, Squid, Swarm, and, wait for it, Panda Mania. Nice. The Menagerie also is known for trying to rob a club where Nadia Van Dyne was celebrating her birthday with numerous other heroes, which, as you can imagine, it didn't go too well for them. Number 2, Death Throes. Remember how the headmen all came together based on their head-related powers? Well, I'll do you one better. How about the Death Throes, whose powers and names all have something to do with commonly throwing stuff? The ringleader, threw together teammates Bombshell, Knick-Knack, Oddball, Tenpin, and Throwdown into a group that works really well together, juggling their weapons between each other and doing battle with characters like Captain America, Crossfire, Hawkeye, and even Loki of all people, who stopped the group from robbing the big top casino in Las Vegas. The Marvel Wiki even lists their origins as quote-unquote joint effort to perform criminal and mercenary acts while using juggling expertise. I honestly kinda had a hoot putting together this point, as I can't believe this group of villains even exists. And lastly, at number 1 is Horticulture. Okay, of all the teams on this list, I think the Horticulture are my favorite. For starters, they look so cool. But then, you find out it's a bunch of older women between the ages of 64 to 81 who are all expert botanists and want to bring Earth back to its more pristine time when it had about 7 billion less people on it. I just love how they use their regular names, and the names just kinda suit their age and interest in plants. I don't know how, but they kinda just do. Augusta Bromes, Lily Lamus, Edith Scutch, and Opal Vetiver. Gosh. But yes, that's right, these ladies want to basically exterminate most of the Earth's human population and bring plants back to the forefront, specifically flowers. This goal brings them into conflict with the X-Men in 2019's X-Men number 3. Beyond biological modifications believed to have been made to themselves, the women of horticulture are experts at manipulating the environment to suit their extinction agenda, and they're also computer programmers, selling software to Orcus to monitor Krakoan gateways. But seriously, look at them. They're just awesome.